Yes.
Right.
Do you go into it like thinking, I don't know, the show's on at 11 o'clock.
But that's the thing. There's no one on.
There really, yeah. Who is your competition?
That
is the news your competition?
That is the joy. Genuinely, that is the joy. That like when it started, I remember people would tell me that they'd be like, "Oh, we need a rivalry." That's like such an American thing. You guys love. I love it. You love war.
Yes,
you guys just love war, Howard.
I needed something to push me.
Why?
Because I'm an angry guy.
No, Howard.
And I want to win.
No, I get pushed by my joy.
You guys,
I had to learn that. You know, I had to learn that in America. I had to learn to be comfortable in the fact that I do not exist in a state of perpetual anger.
How are you such a joyous man based on what I know of your childhood in South Africa?
Yeah.
It sounds worse than mine. It sounds horrible. You were the victim of abuse. You were the victim of racial hatred because you had a white father and you had light skin. You just, going back to your humble beginnings in South Africa. First of all, I find your story pretty amazing. I didn't realize to what extent you were such a big star in South Africa.
Oh, thank you.
Isn't it weird coming to it? Like, you were a big star in South Africa, really well known, had like 7 comedy albums, and everywhere you went, people knew who you were.
Right.
As you got older, once you started doing stand-up comedy, and then you come here, and you're nobody.
Yeah.
Is that devastating to you?
It's the best feeling in the world.
Bullshit.
It's the best feeling in the world. Jerry Seinfeld said, "The enemy of comedy is celebrity," and he was 100% correct when he said that.
But because we all have egos.
No. That's the thing. I promise you now, as a stand-up comedian, if I could make people not know who I was every time I got on stage, that would be the perfect life to live. Because now I have all the experience I've garnered from life, but none of the expectation.
Wouldn't that be a great experiment, though?
But I do that all the time. That's why I go do comedy in every country in the world. I was doing comedy in Japan now. There's some people who are like, "Who the hell is this guy?"
Is comedy, in a way, a challenge only when you're not known? Do you get laughs too easily now because you're known from TV? Is that what you're saying?
No, it changes. It changes. So when you are completely unknown, the audience has no expectation of you. So you step onto that stage and they go, "Well, let's see what happens."
Right.
You start at zero. And the great thing about starting at zero, especially if, like for me, when I came to America, is here's this kid who's doing, they're like, you're the opening act. And then you have the experience and the wealth of knowledge of a closer. And so immediately you move in leaps and bounds that people aren't expecting you to move in. And I was loving it because I was like, I get to restart my comedy career. I get to re-enjoy that. But when you're well known, you have the expectation. When you get on stage, people start at a 10, and now you've got to maintain that 10.
Are you also saying that you go out on stage now?
Yeah.
Okay, and you're so well known, maybe the audience is like, fuck this guy. He's rich. He's successful. Who's he bullshitting here? He doesn't relate to us. Why is he talking about going to the bathroom in public bathroom?
I don't think there's many Howard Sterns in my audience.
I don't know. I mean, it's a weird thing what you're talking about, because here's what I compare it to in my own life, if I may. I was on in Washington, D.C. I was the #1 disc jockey in Washington, D.C. Everywhere I went, people knew me, and I loved it. Right. It meant I was successful. I didn't love necessarily walking around having to deal with it, but I loved that the show was successful.
Got it.
I'd come to New York to visit my parents, and not one fucking person knew me. And it made me insane.
Oh, that's the best feeling in the world.
It was the worst feeling. I said, I'm killing it on the radio. Why can't I be on nationally? I'm doing all this good material. Right. Why am I not? And then I come to New York, and now I'm a big star in New York, and I go to California, and there's motherfuckers on the radio doing what I'm doing. And I was livid. I was beside myself with anger.
Oh, man.
I wanted to murder every one of them in the ratings.
No.
And I had to go city by city and do that.
No.
There's none of that in you?
No, I need every show to be, I judge myself by myself. I'll watch my shows. I will look at my material and I'll be like, what could I have done better? Why is that not as funny? Why is that? Come on, man. Think better, Trevor. Think that, like, I'm always.
You'll look at every one of your TV shows or your stand-up shows?
The stand-up shows I listen to, I can't watch myself.
Right.
But then the TV shows I'll watch, and I'll watch.
I'm so glad to hear you say that.
Yeah.
Because so many people say, I can't watch that.
No. I have to watch it. I have to understand why. And I go like, why? Why? What am I doing? Okay, there, you're speaking too fast, or you're doing, or this or that, or that's not how you think you're doing it. Sometimes how you think you're doing a thing is not how it comes across on screen.
In other words, you could have delivered the joke better, or I could have even crafted that joke better.
You can always craft a joke better.
And you do that by yourself, or do you have people who can be honest with you?
I watch Oh, but I'm lucky. I have one of my best friends who's a producer on the show, came from South Africa with me. And then I have the producers who I found at the show who I've been lucky enough to grow with. And we watch and we just, like, I work in an honest office where anyone can give feedback.
No one's blowing smoke up your ass.
No.
You mean to tell me this guy from South Africa can walk in and go, you did a bad show today?
Is that him knocking on the door speaking?
No, that's speaking.
Okay, got it.
I'm assuming he knows how to speak several languages like you do. But I'm saying, in other words...
he does, by the way. He does.
When is the last time you thought you did a really bad show?
When was the last time?
Does anything pop into your mind?
The last time I had a bad show, it wasn't a bad show. That's the interesting. Sometimes the show is good, but the day you just don't match with the audience. It could be like New York City was rainy and shitty and the audience doesn't feel good. And, so sometimes the show is good. You know that the show is good.
But the audience is shitty.
But the audience doesn't feel what you're feeling.
Really? Because Bill Maher says the same thing, too, about... Do you watch his show at all?
I've watched it now and then.
Yeah, I like what he's doing, too, in terms of, like, I like his humor and everything, but then he'll go completely serious and have a discussion and political opinion. And he says... in a way, the audience restricts him, and he fantasizes about doing a show without the audience sitting there. If I had it right, what he said. Do you ever fantasize about fucking audience? Why do we need the audience?
I've thought of that, but then I remember that the audience serves as a proxy for the people at home. And so for me, if I'm not careful, without an audience, I will then succumb to believing that every idea I have is the correct idea, and everything that I'm saying is completely cognizant or makes sense because it does for me. And what I like about having an audience is sometimes live on the fly, forget what's in the prompter. I'll just realize that the live audience did not understand what I said.
Right.
And then I'll rephrase it. I'll say it again. I'll go off book. You know what I mean? And that's what I love about the Daily Show is when I'm doing it, I am being me in the moment and I'm shooting the show as if it's live, and I'll talk to the people. And then I realize, oh, this is not connecting because I focused so much on the words, but not on how to express those words. And having real people there helps me remember that.
It's so complex to me because I love doing radio because I have no audience.
Yeah.
And then every once in a while, I go out and do these talk shows. Like I just did 3 of them.
Right.
And that audience makes me speed up at times because I'm not hearing that laugh. And I need to hear it every 30 seconds from them or I think I'm bombing.
So do you hear it in your head when you're doing the radio show?
Yeah, I just I don't have that pressure. I hear the guy that I'm playing to having a good time.
Got it.
I find with these live audiences, you almost end up like they're a monster in a way because when those quiet moments occur, and it doesn't necessarily mean you're not being funny, but you may be saying something just intriguing.
Yes.
Do you get nervous that you're tanking?
No, I've had to learn, and that's where Dave Chappelle has been a wonderful friend and mentor.
There's 3 mentors you rely on: Oprah, Dave Chappelle, and Chris Rock. Am I correct?
I've many more. Luckily,
you call these people?
We just bump into each other in life.
What did Chappelle say to you that helped you with that?
Chappelle said to me, we were doing a show at Radio City together. It was during his run,
right?
And I was on one of the shows, and he said to me, I said, man, what am I going to tell these? Because I was like, I'm going to do comedy before Dave Chappelle. I was like, Dave, what am I even doing here? And Dave said, and I said, I don't even know if I'm funny enough to be here. I said, you're nice, and I think I'm a really funny guy, but what am I doing here? And Dave said, look, man. He said, you don't understand something. He said, you're not here because you're funny. He says, I know 100 funny motherfuckers out there. He said, you're here because you're interesting. And he said, anyone can be funny. Not everybody can be interesting. Not everyone can make an audience listen to what they're saying. Not everyone has a wealth of life experience that makes people want to know what they have in their minds. And so that changed my perspective on silence. And so now, if I can hear that an audience is listening, I'm engaged.
Well, that is a great piece of advice, not only for comics, but for anybody. Right. Because, wow, the thing that I love about Chappelle, and you just identified it, is he will go.
He's interesting.
And he is an interesting guy.
He's the most interesting man I've ever met. That's what makes Dave Chappelle. Many people are funny. There's a lot of funny stand-up comedians all over the world.
Yes.
But what makes Dave Chappelle is that he is interesting. It's how he sees the world between the jokes.
Is your relationship with Oprah that you can pick up a phone and call her and ask her advice?
I don't know if I have
she's a mentor.
I don't know if I have her real number, but I probably could get a hold of her.
But how is she a mentor?
She has a number. Well, Oprah just gives me advice. Oprah's given me advice on 2 things. One, obviously the show, how to make just like small elements in and around making television and making it. It's similar to what you and I do.
But how does,
you know what I mean?
How does this conversation occur? Did you pick up a phone and say, Oprah, you were so successful in television?
We just meet. So for instance, I was on her podcast when she was doing, her podcast in and around books. And then she came on my show, and then we meet at an event, and then I'll do something for her girls' school in South Africa. And so life has kept us in contact.
And her advice to you was what in terms of doing a daily television?
It'll just be small. She doesn't even give it as like advice where we sit down. Oprah will just give me a small moment of advice in an interview. For instance, she'll go, "Oh, that was nice. The way you keep those questions moving between each other, and the way you're engaged, keep that. That's nice. That's nice. That's good to remember to do." And sometimes great advice is not telling you what to do because you weren't doing it. It's rather reminding you to do something you were doing without realizing you were doing it.
I watched her with you, and I don't know if you picked up this vibe or you're comfortable with this. I think she's extremely attracted to you sexually. There was a sexual chemistry coming from her. I'm not saying you were putting it out there. But did you sense this? I mean, the woman couldn't take her eyes off you and kept referring to your appearance like you were a piece of meat.
I think Oprah loves me.
I do too.
And I love Oprah.
Yeah, I think she would hop in the sack with you in 3 minutes.
I have never thought that. I can safely say that.
Did I create this in my mind?
I don't know.
I
don't
saw
know.
Something there.
But that's good television either way.
The fact
that you felt that is good television.
The best.
That's what every interview should be. Right now, people should be watching us and going, "I think Howard and Trevor want to have sex." That's what they should be thinking.
I would
right now.
love to have sex with you.
You see, then this is a good interview.
Yeah, really happening. Well, I mean, I've heard a lot of women say how handsome you are, which, I mean, listen, let's face it, you're going to be on television. Looking good ain't a bad thing. But
yes.
But the best moment, do you think of yourself as handsome?
I think my face came together well. I struggled because my whole life I was teased and I suffered from low self-esteem.
Because of your skin color?
Because of my face. It didn't work.
You mean, in other words, you weren't perceived as when you were a young man, you were not a ladies' man?
No, far from it. The only ladies' man I was my grandmother and my mom.
Really?
There was no ladies enough. I struggled with low self-esteem my entire life because of it was so rough. I mean, I had acne like coming out of every pore on my skin. My face itself.
How did you get rid of the acne? Did you use that thing they inject you with?
I used Accutane. Yeah, I used Accutane. That's how bad it got. But it changed my life for the better and worse because I mean, if I waited, the acne would have gone away. But then now with the Accutane, I got like depressed, and then it made things worse. And people don't tell you about the psychological effect. It was a whole thing.
Well, wait a second. You assume that your pimples, bad acne. I've seen people with bad acne. Their lives are saved by this Accutane.
True.
And it doesn't always go away. In fact, it can leave horrible scars on your face.
That's true.
So,
but I mean, I don't know.
You suffered depression from the Accutane?
No, I'm just saying it makes you get wildly whatever your thing is becomes exacerbated.
No kidding. I never heard this.
So before. I remember crying one day when I was watching the Oscars. This was in South Africa, and then I just started like crying hard when someone was giving an acceptance speech. I've never cried during an acceptance. I was just like, I'm so happy. But it takes you. You've got to be careful when you're on something like Accutane. Your liver, I think it is, and then also just your psychological states.
I was watching you the other day.